I want to start today's video with a bit of a clarification. I'm not huge into wrestling. I know some of the basic fan terminology, and I've seen a few matches and played a few games, so I definitely get the appeal. It's a high-energy event that's one part kinda dumb and on the other hand, easy to get sucked into. And I think video games are an excellent medium within which to enjoy the sport to the fullest, with several games boasting huge rosters of multiple decades of famous heels and faces that even create your own wrestler options, all of which can be hilariously good fun. Today's game is not any of those things, except for the kind of dumb part. What do I mean by that? Well, join me for a closer look at Konami's foray into women's wrestling, Rumble Roses. Greetings everyone, this is the Hipster Snek, and I want to whisk you back, away to the distant year of ancient past, the year 2004. Cog and I are still in high school, enjoying the GameCube, PS2, Xbox generation of hardware and all the goodness that came with it. And being the young, enterprising gentlemen that we were, we saw ads for this upcoming women's wrestling game from Konami, Rumble Roses. And we immediately ridiculed it and decided to not buy it. I mean, look at this. Does this look like a game that's trying to sell itself on the quality of its gameplay mechanics and realistic wrestling emulation? No. This looks like an H-spoof trying to muscle its way into the genre to appeal to a certain young, desperate, holes in pockets demographic of lonely Axe body spray smelling nerds. Thus, we didn't play it, didn't buy it, and eventually, I forgot it completely existed. Right up until I bought a little something called Super Bomberman R. This is actually a really fantastic game, a wonderful new installment in the Bomberman franchise, and I am not here to review that game. Because somebody, Cog, went and reminded me in the wake of mentioning this cameo, Cog, that this game actually exists, and then Cog, someone, went and told me to review it. And because I can't back down from a truly stupid idea, here I am. Let's talk about Rumble Roses, I guess. So the game starts with this really long intro cutscene sequence. Seriously, I timed it, it's 4 minutes long. That's really long for this era. I know long cutscenes are just part and parcel of video games, but you guys gotta remember, this was back in the day when these consoles were fairly young, and the idea of excessively long cutscenes, the likes of the, MSQ and Final Fantasy XIV, were still really far off. And it's the entirety of a cover of Yankee Rose, a song originally performed by David Lee Roth and Steve Vai, covered by Teresa James, and, well, it's good. I mean, legitimately, the graphics are solid. This song does sound like something they'd really play before a women's wrestling championship. But here's the thing, this is a video game and this cutscene's 4 minutes long. That is too long, especially considering that this game only has 11 characters to showcase. Let's do a little math here just for fun because I want to forestall having to play it as long as I humanly can. Let's see, 4 minutes is 240 seconds. Divide that by 11 characters and, round it up, you get 22 seconds each. That is a shockingly long span of time to show off that your game is really only selling itself on the one feature. Okay, 2 features, you want to get overly pedantic. No, I'm not explaining that joke, ask your parents. But hey, gotta burn that disk space somehow. It's sure not being filled by the barely larger than Mortal Kombat 1 roster of 11 girls. Let's start with the graphics. And graphically, the game's good. From a technical standpoint, I'd dare go as far as to call it downright impressive. The dev team claimed each heroine has over 10,000 polys in their models, which would be record-setting for the PS2, if true. And I have little reason to doubt it. I mean, it looks solid, even for the time of its debut. The audiences are lively and animated as such, and do I have to talk about this? The mud physics. There's mud physics in this game, and they look good, I guess. I'm not really sure what they should look like, but I guess that's right. Of course there's mud wrestling, don't be ridiculous. I feel like this review is going to land me on some kind of list, I just don't know what type yet. The game looks good is my point, and a lot of care and detail was put into it. It's a shame that same level of effort wasn't put into anything else. For instance, the audio is a mixed bag of highs and lows, leaning more heavily on the latter than the former. Yankee Rose is indeed a gem, but they're so lazy they actually reuse it as one of the wrestlers' fighting songs too. And among these songs, well, there are a lot of yawns. The entire heel-face gimmick, more on that in a minute, is at the very least relied on, as each character persona does get their own unique song, but it doesn't really change up the songs you'll hear the most, that being the music they play during the actual wrestling matches. It's all kind of a dull hum. It doesn't make me want to mute the TV necessarily, but it's not really amazing either. Alright, I have dragged my lack of feet as long as I can, so I get to talk about the gameplay now. Alright children, gather round while Uncle Snek does his best to explain this, keeping in mind the all-important asterisk that my mother watches my videos after the fact, and anything I say can and will be used against me at a future date, including but not limited to the Thanksgiving dinner table. At its core, Rumble Roses is a wrestling game, one of many games that seek to emulate the sport of wrestling. In games like this, the gimmick is often something like trying to realistically implement the moves each wrestler is known for having, or by having lots and lots of various game modes which change up the nature of each match. Rumble Roses attempts none of that because, while they went the Street Fighter route of eccentric weirdos gathered from around the globe entering into a contest, they also opted to keep most of the characters somewhat grounded in reality, meaning most of them are just boring brown-haired girls who could have come from literally anywhere. Game devs, here's a free tip. If you're going to do the global contest angle, just embrace it. Go full G Gundam. Make it silly on purpose. The only people who will get mad were never going to buy the game to begin with. That said, let's get into the roster just a little bit to explain that whole heel-face thing I keep bringing up. In wrestling terms, a face is a hero, or at least a generally good character the audience wants to see win, and the heel is a villain, or at least a pariah of some sort who's supposed to lose after some kind of storyline. Wrestling is goofy, what can I say? But here's the thing. While every character starts one alignment or the other by using the game's VOW system, self-set parameters you have to meet within the match, like winning in a certain amount of time, or taunting, or using a special move, you can change their overall alignment and unlock the mirror versions of their persona. While this almost sounds interesting, there's a reason you don't see many other wrestling games using a system like this one. If the game wants more characters, they usually just make more characters. It doesn't help that the alter ego version of the character usually has a much shorter storyline. Not that the story is much to talk about. Here, I want to show you guys this just so you'll believe me when I bring this up, but the game has a one-sentence long story summary on Wikipedia. I'm not joking. Look, here it is. I screenshot it for you. Quote, plot. A mad scientist, disguised as a nurse, holds an international women's wrestling tournament and brainwashes and takes DNA samples from the participants to create super soldiers. That's it. That's the overarching story. The weird nurse lady wrestler, Anesthesia, feigns being a face in order to host the wrestling tournament and steal DNA and body parts from the other wrestlers in order to build super women's wrestlers to somehow destabilize the world military balance. And it turns out her heel form was her true personality, but she was pretending that it was a different person and the one in charge of the whole operation. Oh my god, this game is real somehow. Oh, here's a fun bug. In exhibition mode, only the persona you've most recently unlocked for the character is available for play, as for whatever reason, you can't have them both unlocked in that mode. Not that it really matters, as with the secret unlockable Lady X, both her modes are the same character, with only the fact that one of them gets a projectile in a wrestling game to make her distinct. Pretty sure if you whipped out a gun during a wrestling match, I think you'd be disqualified. That being said, I guess I have to pick up and play the game now. Alright, fair enough. I decided that, for the sake of my playthrough, I'm going to play exclusively as Dixie Clements, a secondary protagonist from America who serves as secondary heroine to Reiko, a la Ken and Ryu in Street Fighter. Plus, if you haven't figured it out yet, I hail from the American South and I have a weakness for that particular accent, regardless of the mediocrity of the voice cast.
There's one gal I've always looked up to. Her name was Kamikaze Rose, the legendary wrestler. No matter how tough the going got, she would hang in there. The sight of her beautiful wrestling technique encouraged me when I was young.
I mean, this was the PS2. Mediocre voice work is what you expect in most cases. Cue Titus laugh here, followed by thousands of screaming fanboys and the repeated use of the phrase out of context here. Okay, so I begin my playthrough and oh my god, these controls are unbelievably stiff. It's not that Dixie's a slow character. There really isn't a slow or glacier-styled character in this roster that I've discovered. It's just that everything in this engine runs like it's going through molasses. I've seen wrestling. Wrestling's fast and frenetic, but even the act of running in this game is stilted and awkward, and attacking out of a run is just yikes. You better master the timing on this, because otherwise you'll be whiffing a lot. Thank goodness this is before the era of real-time voiceover narration in wrestling games, because I got to play all this without so much as the benefit of having an instruction booklet. So of course I get smashed. Eventually I win a few rounds just out of sheer bloody-minded persistence, and I break down and reference a move list from my character. Turns out the direction you're holding on the control stick changes how your attacks and grapples work. Okay, that makes sense, just the timing for it is awkward and unnatural, and some things just don't appear to work under any circumstances. Maybe I'm just bad at the game. Do you guys at home know how you win in wrestling? You pin the other wrestler for a 3 count, or you're forced him to tap out via a submission. The way this game operates with the latter works rather well. You have a fixed set of time to break out of a submission hold by mashing buttons like a madman, and the more damage your wrestler has taken, the shorter that allotted time will be, giving a real risk-reward to longer or shorter matches. But for the pins, I have no idea. This just seems totally random. Sometimes they work even if the match has just started, and sometimes you kick out of them with no real rhyme or reason, even after the wrestler has been beaten beyond any human limit. I never once in my time playing figured out how you're supposed to execute a pin properly or break free out of one. So I won pretty much every match either via submission or blind luck, which works well enough, I guess. Then comes in the humiliation mechanic, which involves getting outside the ring. For some reason, they largely don't work in ring, except certain contexts seem to cue it, I don't know. And using certain types of attacks on your enemies and filling up a meter on their HUD. Which ones do and which ones don't seems a bit random, but whatever. Once filled, the wrestler falls over, and this happens. Yeah. This then allows you to do a humiliation attack, which is just a submission hold, but the camera likes to point at their butt during them. Sigh. Alright, let's cut to the chase. It's slow, it's clunky, it has no in-game tutorial, and nothing explains itself well at all. The exhibition mode is broken due to how unlocks work, and the game itself is rather mediocre jank. The story is stupid, and they managed to make a sequel that basically fixed none of these problems and was also likewise forgettable and mediocre. So, why don't I hate this? The truth is, in my time playing, while I didn't particularly like the game, I found that there was some charm to it. Slow and clunky, yes, but it was satisfying to land a big kick and throw your enemy around. The mechanics are mediocre, but not awful, and the AI is competent enough to give you a decent challenge. Story is stupid, yes, but wrestling as a whole is stupid, so it felt perfectly at home. The dialogue was somewhere between goofy and god-awful, but that made it funny to me, dare I call it endearing. The vows and persona system, while superfluous and not particularly welcome, were at least interesting. There was some thought and depth put into these proceedings. It's a shame they couldn't extend that past the graphics and the marketing. But if that level of care that does, even if so narrowly, nudge this just outside of don't make games like territory. If Konami tried to revive it and gave it much more care, and toned down the sheer shamelessness of it all, they could probably have a winner on their hands, hypothetically speaking. This has been the Rumble Snek, bringing to light a once-thought-forgotten relic of the time. If you liked today's episode, hit like so I know. And for more obscure reviews, indie excellence, Snek Tech, and the new home of the Tomodachi Bros podcast YouTube mirror, hit the subscribe and bell icon so that you'll never miss a one. Join me here each week for more like this, and hopefully, more that are better. And I will see you there.